It just seems unbelievable. A teacher accused of sexually assaulting a young student goes from school district to school district without anyone sounding the alarm.
Not the schools, not the state, not even the police. I-Team reporter PJ Randawa brings us the shocking details of what her investigation into this case found.
Mike and Ann, for years he helped teach children, perhaps even your child. But police claim Deontay Taylor had another purpose for working in schools: sexual gratification. School's out at Walnut Grove Elementary, and parents in the pickup line are about to learn something they didn't see coming. Do you recognize this man?
Oh God, that is every parent's nightmare. Like, oh my God.
The familiar face in this orange jumpsuit is a man who used to teach their kids.
I swear that teacher never touched you. You're a teacher, so how are you working here and you're doing stuff like that to kids?
A man prosecutors say graduated from teaching to rape and eventually attempted murder. November 2015, 36-year-old Deontay Taylor is a teacher's aide at Lusher Elementary School. Court documents accuse Taylor of taking a 7-year-old boy out of music class to his office, molesting him, and then putting the little boy back in class. Almost immediately, the boy's mother notified police and the child was examined for sexual assault. A few days later, the Hazelwood School District fired Taylor, but not over the suspected abuse, for, quote, violating school board policy. Now, they won't specify which policy, and we also found they didn't notify parents about what Taylor was accused of. Don't you think parents in the district would have wanted to know what this teacher was accused of?
It's very hard for parents to understand that we have to live by laws.
Oh my God.
I think it's absolutely insane. This is something that should have been spoke about.
DNA evidence confirmed the child was assaulted, but no DNA sample was taken from Taylor. He was not arrested. He wasn't even questioned by Florissant police. So when the student says, this teacher did this to me, why wasn't DNA taken from Deontay at that point? Police Chief Tim Lowry's answer may make your jaw drop.
And, for some reason, this case just basically sat on somebody's desk and was not investigated properly.
So basically, an accused sexual predator was left free on the streets because this office dropped the ball.
Well, it wasn't my office that dropped the ball, it was my investigators that dropped the ball, yes.
You're in charge of those
Yes,
investigators, they're your employees, they represent this office.
We made a mistake. I mean, there's no doubt we made a mistake. We made a huge mistake.
After being fired from the Hazelwood district for, quote, a violation of board policy, Taylor applied here in the Jennings School District to be a student teacher. And he got the job. Why wouldn't you tell his next employer? He went on to teach in multiple school districts and have access to potentially hundreds of kids. Why not let them know what he was accused of?
Well, it was an accusation. That's as far as it went.
After Jennings, Taylor got a job teaching 5th grade in the Ferguson-Florissant School District. Then, during his second year there, prosecutors finally charged Taylor for sexually assaulting his former student back in 2015. Police claim there was new information, but the real reason was simple and heartbreaking. Were there new revelations that came out in 2018 that led to the reopening of this case? That's what we were told, but was it just the victim reporting it again?
Yes.
It's all here in court documents. Taylor would still be in school to this day if it wasn't for that little boy. 3 years after he had the courage to come forward, he reported the abuse again during an outburst at school. It was then police got a warrant for Taylor's DNA, and it was a match for the sample taken off the child's body back in 2015. So if he hadn't spoken about it in 2018, Deontay Taylor, an accused sexual predator, would still be in our school systems with access to other potential victims.
It's possible.
A possibility that leaves these parents in fear, because soon after he was charged with felony sodomy, prosecutors would also learn Taylor is HIV positive.
I think it's sad, and any parents that have children that could have came in contact with this person, they should definitely speak up and get their child tested, because it's absolutely ridiculous.
It took 3 years, but Deontay Taylor was taken out of class and finally put in jail. Unfortunately, prosecutors say Taylor wasn't done yet. Trust me when I say you won't believe what happens next. Prosecutors say Taylor hired a hitman to kill his young victim and their family. Tomorrow night at 10, we sit down with that hitman and find out why he agreed to take the job. By the way, Taylor is currently awaiting trial for charges including sodomy and recklessly risking the infection of another person with HIV.
A former teacher accused of sexually assaulting a little boy at school was back in court today. Prosecutors claim that Deontay Taylor not only molested the child, but also hired someone to kill his young victim and the boy's family.
Tonight, the I-Team's PJ Rendawa sits down for an exclusive interview with the man allegedly hired to do that hit. PJ.
Mike and Ann, our investigation sounds more like a Hollywood movie than real life. In the starring role, a homeless father of 10 who was just desperate enough to take the job. Jail isn't a place anyone wants to be, John White included.
Well, they put murderers in with traffic tickets. Wherever they have room, they stick you.
He's not a career criminal, but no Boy Scout either. On his record, a string of offenses. A 2014 burglary tops the list.
I haven't had much. I'm not, no big crimes or anything.
But when White found himself behind bars on a probation violation in February, the big crime found him.
And he called me to the rec yard and said, hey, I got something I need you to do for me. I want to know if you will take a hit.
White says the man making that deadly request was an elementary school teacher named Deontay Taylor. Taylor was in jail charged with molesting a student at Lusher Elementary School. Turns out that little boy was still on Taylor's mind, and as police would soon discover, on his hit list.
And he told me that it was a 10-year-old boy and his mother and grandmother, and I kind of got interested, like, are you serious? You want to hurt a baby? You know
White didn't want to believe Taylor was serious. Then he got the note.
That Saturday, he pushed a note up under my door. It had the victim's name, phone number, address, social security number, driver's license number, everything.
Did he describe what he wanted you to do specifically? How he wanted them killed?
The only specific part he asked was that it looked like an accident, make it look like a carbon monoxide leak, or either start a fire while everybody was asleep and try and put it on the kid playing with matches.
Those are horrific ways to die.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are.
Even though he had 10 kids of his own, White says he agreed to kill the little boy and his family.
So I felt like if I didn't do it, he would have gotten somebody else to do it.
How much was he going to pay you?
It was $20,000.
Did he talk about where he'd get the money?
Well, the school was paying him when he wasn't fired. He was on paid leave.
The I-Team went to the Ferguson Florissant School District for answers. So he was behind bars, accused of molesting the student, and he's still getting a paycheck from the district.
The standard practice is when someone is placed on leave, they're placed on paid administrative leave.
It was money he promised White to do the job. Before he was released, White says Taylor gave him a name and phone number.
He told me that Mike was his ride or die.
According to prosecutors, Taylor's ride or die was this man, 66-year-old Michael Johnson, Taylor's longtime boyfriend.
What I gathered from it, Michael was going to court, and he was describing how the mother and the grandmother looked. This is where I met Michael the first time. He was just saying, I appreciate you doing this because Deontay needs to be home and I want my baby home with me. And he handed me the $500. He said, I have to hurry up and get back to the church because I'm the choir coordinator.
White had two choices, take the money and run or sound the alarm. Did you at any point, even consider it?
Never. I got a baby that just turned 10. And that's all that was going through my head.
He turned everything over to investigators. What was their reaction when you told them that?
Well, they said they weren't surprised. They seen everything.
St. Louis County Police took it from there, and prosecutors found enough evidence to charge both Taylor and Johnson with conspiracy to commit murder and witness tampering.
And upon them bringing him in the police station, I think he seen my face. And he goes, it says out loud, oh, he told on me. Amy like, wow, really? You're confessing already?
He confessed.
He confessed.
White admits he could have used the money, but he has no regrets going from potential hitman to, some would say, a hero. Do you feel like you saved their lives?
I do, because they were very serious. Definitely was divine intervention. I have no question about that at all.
Well, John White says he'd like to meet the family he helped save. A victim's advocate working with that family says they're hopeful that can happen in the future. That advocate has also set up a GoFundMe account to help the family pay for moving expenses and counseling for the child victim. You can find a link to that GoFundMe site on our website, ksdk.com. Just look for this story.
He was a teacher accused of molesting his own student. Florissant police admitted to our I-team they dropped the ball, and it was years before that teacher was charged.
After that story aired in May, another family contacted us, alleging that police mishandled their case too. Investigative reporter PJ Rendawa went back to police looking for some answers. PJ?
Mike and Ann, even though these cases are years apart, there are striking similarities. They're both child abuse cases that appear to have not been fully investigated.
So 9 minus 1 is?
For 8 years,
9, 10.
Kathy Record thought the woman babysitting her 4 kids was just as she appeared, a sweet, nurturing grandmother. Her name was Brenda Trokey.
I guess I was probably a little naive. I didn't really notice anything at the time that she would be this person that she turned out to be.
But that all changed one day in 2008 when Kathy picked up her 2.5-year-old son.
Sat him on the bed, I guess took his hat off. The blood just came rushing out of the ear.
The little boy had a non-accidental fracture in his femur and a perforated eardrum. 2 injuries doctors believed were the result of child abuse. The babysitter broke down.
She said, I tripped over the laundry basket. I was mad, so I hit him repeatedly on the side of his head.
Trokey was arrested and charged with assault and endangering the welfare of a child. Yet the family's nightmare was just beginning. Soon, Record's 3 other children would come forward with their own horror stories.
Just being tortured. Bags over their heads, Windex being sprayed in their mouths daily. They were forced to stay in the basement. Their food was taken from them or they weren't fed.
So the family called the Florissant police to file another police report with the new information. It would take 8 months before the children were even interviewed. We sat down with the new Florissant Police Chief Tim Fagan for answers.
Was the suspect ever questioned?
The suspect was not questioned.
Why?
The second time. That was at the direction of the prosecuting attorney.
That attorney is no longer with the prosecutor's office. But a spokesman for current St. Louis County Prosecutor Wesley Bell tells us he's never been involved in a case where a prosecutor asked investigators not to interview a suspect. A state review of the case 4 years later, in 2012, stated the investigation was, quote, not thorough. Ultimately, no new police report was filed.
6, there you go.
It would mean the children wouldn't qualify for victim services like counseling, which they so desperately needed.
Do you think this case was mishandled?
Could this case have been handled better? Certainly.
If this sounds familiar, it's because a few months ago, Chief Fagan's predecessor sat in the same office, admitting to strikingly similar oversights with another child abuse case handled by Florissant police.
We made a mistake. I mean, there's no doubt we made a mistake. We made a huge mistake.
Last April, former Chief Tim Lowry admitted the department mishandled the case against Deontay Taylor, a Florissant teacher accused of abusing a student at school and then allegedly hiring a hitman to kill the boy. Like the Record's babysitter, Taylor was never questioned.
This looks like a pattern, that if you're accused of child abuse in Florissant, the police won't even knock on your door.
And for you to isolate 2 cases over a 12-year period and say that we have a pattern of not caring about child abuse is quite frankly unfair.
These are 4 children who will have to be in counseling for the rest of their lives. Are you saying that nothing can be done to give them justice?
Clearly, with the statute of limitations being expired, there's unfortunately nothing we can do.
Trokey eventually received a sentence of house arrest for assaulting the Record's youngest son. The Record children received a much longer sentence, a lifetime of PTSD and unresolved trauma.
We were forgotten. There is something drastically wrong up there.
Well, Chief Fagan says since our investigation in May, the department has instituted a case review policy, which includes weekly meetings between investigators and supervisors.